You are not going to talk about it in an actual manner altogether. When the price of the product becomes 6, the quantity will become 6. The quantity demanded and quantity supplied are equal for a particular unit of good or service is the price. Good morning and welcome to the revision 2 in unit 1 of business decision theories, where we are going to talk about some important terms in supply and demand analysis. Now, this is a very important session. Why? Because I am trying to concentrate on certain important terms which are very useful in terms of knowing their meaning and also about their practical application. So let us start with the first word for today, demand curve. All of us know that demand curve is a curve that slopes downwards from the left to the right. But what is this demand curve? Why is it so important when we talk about it in terms of business decision making? A simple thing here is that it's a graphical representation of relationship between price and quantity. So quantity being on the horizontal axis, price being on the vertical axis. So we are going to talk about two important factors, one called as the price, the other one called as the quantity. Now, we all know that whenever we talk about price and quantity, that's a direct reflective in terms of the price decision making activity. Because whenever you want to find out the price of a product, the factor which that will come in, that's a demanded value that will come in, is your price and quantity factor. We also know that when the price falls down, the quantity will go up, and when the price starts going up, the quantity will start falling down because they are inversely proportional. So price and quantity has got an inverse proportional that can be shown by this particular graph. So I would always say that price is inversely proportional to quantity factor. That is why this demand curve is being spoken about in great value and length, because this is something which will tell you over a period of time how the value of goods start increasing or decreasing. The other thing here is that in terms of business economics, business decision making, every single product will have some relationship. We are not going to go by the actual values or the market values every time. We have to understand the relationship, the link between the market demand and that of the existing price. So that's why I always intend to use this word relationship between two particular factors known as price and quantity. So in short, whenever we talk about demand curve, it has to be written in this following way: a graphic representation of relationship between the quantity demanded and the price of a certain good. So whenever you are going to talk about two terms in a relative manner, you are not going to talk about it in an actual manner altogether. Followed by a demand schedule. Now, a demand schedule is a table. It's an imaginary table which I would like to explain here. Let's take price and quantity. Now, when the price of a product is 10 rupees, quantity demanded will be 2. Now, when the price of the product becomes 8 rupees, quantity demanded will be 4. When the price of the product becomes 6, the quantity will become 6. Now, what is happening here is that as the price starts falling down, the quantity starts increasing on the other side. So that's where we are going to show the relationship in terms of a tabular column between price and the quantity demanded. Now you may ask, sir, is it always needed to follow the same kind of table? No, you can assume your own values, but you have to show the relationship between price and quantity. So let me just put it here. This is price, this is the quantity factor. So whenever you are putting this table, you will be trying to tell me in terms of the quantity demanded for the respective prices that are given in the table. So it's very, very important that you understand the schedule here. Now, whenever I use the word demand schedule, this is only an imaginary table which tries to bring in the relationship between the price and quantity in a numerical, in a tabular format altogether. This is not fixed. This is not a predetermined value. You can derive the value with your own assumptions following demand itself. The relationship between price and the quantity demanded for a certain good or services. Now, this is what you need to understand by the factor called as demand. Now, what happens is that whenever we talk about demand, people immediately say that demand means it's the availability of the product. The product is demanded. That is not the correct one. The correct answer is the relationship between price versus quantity. That's where you need to understand the demand function. So what happens here is that the ability of customer comes in between. If the customer is able to buy a product at the given price, then automatically a demand is created in the market. Now, for example, whenever we talk about the Amazon Prime Day sale, amazing billion day sales for India, what he typically tries to do is that he tries to trigger through the price and the quantity demanded. So when you see the price and when you see the quantity, there is a trigger in the mind of the consumer whether we can go and make this purchase. That's exactly what we need to understand in terms of demand factor altogether. Why? Because demand is not just about availability. Demand is not something created by the customers. Demand is something that is created in the market by two factors called as price and quantity. So whenever you are going through this word called as demand in your textbook, in your unit, you need to understand it's a relationship between price and quantity. The next one, equilibrium price altogether. When I say equilibrium price, that means the price where quantity of the demanded and the one which is supplied are meeting. So let us just draw a diagram here trying to explain the equilibrium price. Now, this is the demand curve and this is the supply curve. So let me just put it, this is a demand curve, this is the supply curve. The point at which both of them are meeting, that's where the equilibrium price will be created. Now, why do we tell this particular value? Equilibrium means an average standpoint, a midpoint that we are talking about. And this midpoint, as I'm telling you, is where the supply and demand is matching. Because in the market, we are not just worried about the demand. For the respective demand, there should be a supply. And when that supply comes into the market, then automatically we try to reach an equilibrium position. We try to reach a benchmark, a standard, a median value altogether, where the price of the product gets determined in the market. So that's why I would say equilibrium price is very, very important. And how will you decide that price? The price where quantity demanded and the quantity supplied are matching. Because if any one of them are not matching, are in excess, are in shortage, then we will not be able to get a price factor. Only when you see that the price factors, that is the price of the quantity where the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied are matching, then only you will get this equilibrium price. Moving further, equilibrium quantity. Now, quantity is also something which will be pre-decided. That means to say that quantity demanded versus quantity supplied. These two factors are very important for us. So what we try to do here is R equal for a certain price level. Now assuming that you are going to buy apple or orange or wheat or rice, what we try to understand here is that the quantity at which the quantity demanded and quantity supplied are equal for a price level. So let me just equate it here. QD is equal to QS at a particular price. So I'm going to keep the price factor fixed here. So when I fix the price and the demand and supply are matching, then automatically I am coming into the equilibrium quantity altogether. Now this is a very, very important concept. Why? Because whenever you go to the market, you will see that the price fluctuation is causing a trigger, and similarly is the quantity. Moment you see a board where it says that 4 kgs of tomato available for 100 rupees. So what now happens to the mind of the consumer is that the quantitative figures will create a trigger. It means to say that the price of the tomato is fixed at 25 rupees per kg, and if you're buying it in bulk, you will get it for 100 rupees 4 kg. So automatically when I fix the price, the demand and quantity being equated, then automatically the equilibrium quantity comes into picture, followed by equilibrium itself. The situation where quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied, the combination of the price and quantity where there is no economic shortage or a pressure coming in terms of the surplus or shortage coming into picture. Equilibrium, according to me, is a complete standstill in the market. There is no disturbances. What do I mean by equilibrium is that that's a complete standstill. There are no fluctuation, no disturbances coming in terms of price, in terms of any other fluctuations or pressure that is trying to attach here. So I would always say that this factor matters a lot in terms of the importance, in terms of the factors of growth and non-growth activity. So whenever we are talking about this equilibrium, it is a mid-range. That means there's no external pressure. Now when you see in the situation of pandemic, when you see in the situation of emergency, or there is an inflation or deflation, all these kind of conditions coming into picture, the equilibrium cannot be achieved easily. But in a normal course of action, when you are able to achieve that equilibrium status, when you are able to see that market is coming to a standstill position altogether, that's where the economic pressure is zero and the quantity supplied and quantity demanded are matching. So this is a very, very important topic that we need to understand. It is a neutral position. It's a complete standstill, a neutral position where the quantity demanded and quantity supplied are completely matching. Moving further, excess demand. What do you mean by excess demand? I would like to start with this word called as shortage. What is a shortage? Something is lesser than what we are expecting. Now, let's say that a particular product, let's say it might be a rice or wheat or an apple, is needed, the quantity needed is 100 in the market. So we need 100 units of a particular product, but the available is only 80. So what is happening is that there is a 20 which is under the shortage factor. Now that is where the excess demand is coming, which means to say that at the existing price, the price which is prevailing in the market, the quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied. Now you see that the quantity demand is more than what is being supplied. Why? Because price is accepted. People are okay to pay the price. But where is the quantity available? There is a shortage of 20 that's coming into the picture. So that's why we call it a shortage. Why? Because supply is not matching the demand. That's very, very important. There is a demand, there is a price existing, people are ready to pay, but supply is not matching the demand. That's why we call it as shortage. So next time when we talk about excess demand, it is nothing but shortage in the meaning. Now, the next one is excess supply. Just go to the reverse condition. Why? Because I'm starting again with this word called as surplus, which means to say that at the existing price, quantity supplied. Now, the quantity supplied is 100, but the existing demand is only 80. So now what happens? There is a 20 excess of the same product. People want only 80, but there's already a supply of 100. So now what is happening? There is an excess. Surplus is more. So that's why we call it as excess supply. This will normally happen in times when you see that people tend to rush up in the market. People find that there will be a growth in the coming days. So what normally the suppliers tend to do is that at the prevailing price itself, let me just charge up the supply. Let me supply more because I feel that the market is going on a very good trend. So let me just increase the trend. Let me just boost that trend altogether. So that's where they start supplying more and more of that product. But what happens in the long run is that it results in terms of a surplus, where means there will be more supply, lesser demand. The next one, law of demand, which is a very, very basic factor that we have been talking about. The common relationship where the higher price leads to lower quantity of a demanded good, or the lower price leads to a higher quantity demanded, where all other variables are held constant. So we always believe on this factor. Price is inversely proportional to quantity. So at any point of time, please keep this in mind. If there is a price factor, it is inversely proportional. Higher the price, lower the quantity. Lower the price, higher the quantity. That's exactly what law of demand means to us. Whenever price goes up for a particular product, the quantity demanded for that product will come down. Whenever the price goes down for that particular product, automatically the quantity demanded will go up. So that's where the law of demand is coming into picture. Now you might ask me, there are certain products, there are certain features where price does not really vary, where price does not really matter. Yes, exceptions are always there for law of demand, but when we talk about the law of demand in general, it is always the price and quantity factor. So always you need to keep this in mind, and the variables are always held constant. That means variables are, there is no much of variation at all as we are talking about the law of demand. The next thing is law of supply, which is very, very important. What it says, the common relationship that a higher price leads to greater quantity supplied, very, very important, and lower price leads to lower quantity supplied. This is a direct relationship. In the case of supply, what happens is that moment there is a price movement upwards, the quantity supplied will also be higher. Why? Because the suppliers think that this is the right time to make profit. Because there is a movement of the product in the market, I will tend to supply more and more. In the similar manner, when the price starts receding downwards, it starts coming downwards, then automatically the quantity supplied will also start coming down. So in the case of demand, it is an inverse proportion. In the case of supply, it's a direct proportion. Higher the price, higher the supply. Lower the price, lower the supply. So that's where the law of supply comes into picture. Again, let's keep in mind the variables are held constant. That's very, very important for us. Let's go with that particular word. Now, the next thing is price. What is price? A buyer pays for a unit of specific good or service. So whatever the consumer is ready to pay at the market level for a particular unit of good or service is the price. Now, 90% of the time, what happens is that people get confused with this factor. Whatever that is printed is price, or whatever that is determined is price, or whatever that is predicted is price. No, that is not actually true. Why? Because the consumer will always try to bargain on price. The consumer will try to make a shift in the equilibrium. So ultimately, whatever the consumer is ready to pay for a unit of that specific good or service, we call it as the price factor. followed by quantity demanded, which most of us know, the total number of units of a goods or service consumers are willing to purchase at a given price. So at a given price and the willingness to purchase, that's very, very important. Learn the key terms here. They are willing to buy at a given price. Suppose the price which is shown is not acceptable to the consumer, then we will not be able to get the quantity demanded. Consumer is very, very aware about the factor called as the prevailing market price. At that price, if the consumer is happy and he feels that he has the power, he has the intuition, he has the guts to buy the product, willingness, he's showing an interest to buy, then only that quantity demanded will come into picture, or else it will be a complete mismatch. Followed by quantity supplied, the same thing here. Total number of units of goods or service producers are willing to sell. So this is now coming on to the sell side. Suppliers are ready to sell at the given price. So this is a price at which the supplier feels, yes, I am okay with this price. This is what is acceptable to me. So I will sell it at this price only. So that is what we call it as the quantity supplied. Now, the shortage, which most of us know, shortage means that demand exceeds the supply, as we have called that always. So that position is called as excess demand. When the demand is more than the supply, we call it as shortage. On the other side, the supply curve, which comes into picture, shows the relationship between price and quantity on a graph, with the quantity supplied on the horizontal axis, price on the vertical axis. So whenever you see the supply curve is like this, where you will be able to see the price is on the vertical axis and the quantity is on the horizontal axis. So this is your supply curve altogether. So that's why I always tell about this factor. This will tell you the quantity supplied in terms of price versus the quantity factor. Now, the supply schedule, which is going to talk about the range of supply. Now, we can do the supply schedule also just like the demand. As the price is intending, the quantity will also go up. So, let's say the price of the product is 10. The quantity supplied will be also about like 8 or 10. When it goes to 12, this will increase to 10. When this goes to 14, this will increase to say about 15 or 16. So, what is happening is that as the price increases, the quantity will also keep increasing. When the price comes down, the quantity supplied will also start coming down. And now when we talk about supply, again the relationship between price and quantity supplied for the good or service. So supply in general is again about price and the quantity that is being supplied here, followed by surplus, which is a very important thing. As I have told you, here the supply is higher than the demand. So if the supply exceeds the demand more than what is required in the market, then we will achieve a factor called as surplus. But normally this is a rare scenario. Why? Because unless and until you feel the movement is too good, then only surplus comes into picture. With this, I come to the end of this session. I hope and believe that all the information shared through this session will be of a great importance and resource to you. In the upcoming sessions, we shall try to learn some more important factors, problems, and graphs in the business decision theory. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.